Everyone in the courtroom thought she was crazy. A poor girl standing up for the most powerful CEO in the city. But when she said, "I'll prove he's innocent," no one expected what would happen next. Comment below. Where are you watching from? The courtroom was silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras pointed toward the man sitting at the defense table. Alexander Cole, billionaire CEO of Cole Industries, accused of fraud, corruption, and the collapse of hundreds of jobs. Everyone had already decided he was guilty. Everyone except one person. A young woman in worn-out clothes sitting in the back row, clutching a stack of old documents. Her name was Emily Carter, a son. Orphan who once worked as a janitor in Cole Industries before it shut down. She wasn't supposed to be there, but she couldn't stay quiet anymore. When the judge entered and the trial began, the world watched with hungry eyes. The prosecutor was ruthless, painting Alexander as a greedy monster. Every witness turned against him. The man who once ruled skyscrapers now sat broken, eyes empty. Then, during a recess, something shocking happened. Emily stood up. "Your Honor," she said softly, her voice trembling but steady. "I have evidence." The courtroom gasped. The judge frowned. "Who are you?" "My name is Emily Carter," she replied, "and I can prove Mr. Cole is innocent." Laughter broke out instantly. Lawyers chuckled, reporters whispered. A girl in torn jeans and a thrift store blouse claiming she could save a billionaire? Impossible. But the judge silenced the room. "Proceed," he said. Emily stepped forward, clutching a folder of emails and security logs. Her hands shook as she placed them on the table. "These files," she said, "were hidden on the company's old server before it was wiped. They show someone else transferred the funds, not him." The prosecutor smirked. "And how would you, a janitor, have access to company servers?" Emily looked up, meeting his gaze. "Because I was the one cleaning that office the night it happened. I saw who did it." Silence filled the courtroom. Alexander slowly lifted his head, confusion washing over his face. "You saw who?" he asked quietly. Emily nodded. "Yes, and it wasn't you." Gasps echoed around the room. The judge leaned forward, intrigued. "Miss Carter, are you saying you were an eyewitness to the crime?" She swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor, and I have proof." Reporters scrambled to take notes. The prosecutor tried to interrupt, but the judge raised his hand. "Let her speak," he ordered. Emily glanced toward Alexander, who looked at her with disbelief and something else, gratitude, because, for the first time in months, someone believed in his innocence. As she opened the folder, a single photo slid out, one that would change everything. The photo lay face down on the table. Everyone leaned forward as Emily slowly turned it over. It showed a man in a suit, not Alexander, sitting at a computer, his face half lit by the screen's glow. The timestamp matched the night of the crime. "Who is that?" the judge demanded. Emily took a deep breath. "His name is Richard Hale," she said. "The chief financial officer of Cole Industries." Murmurs spread through the courtroom. Richard was sitting in the audience, arms folded, his expression calm, until now. His eyes widened for a split second, then narrowed. "That's ridiculous," he scoffed. "Anyone can fake a photo." Emily didn't back down. "Then explain this," she said, pulling out another document, a printed copy of a deleted email thread between Richard and an offshore account. The judge's brow furrowed. "Where did you get these?" "From a backup drive I found in the IT room," Emily said. "It was left behind after the shutdown." "Objection!" the prosecutor shouted. "This is absurd. She's not even a legal witness." The judge raised a hand. "Overruled." "Continue, Miss Carter." Emily stepped closer to the defense table, her voice gaining strength. Richard blamed Alexander for the transfers, but he was the one who authorized them. He forged Alexander's digital signature and rerouted millions into his own account. I have the logs to prove it. The entire courtroom erupted into whispers. Alexander sat frozen, disbelief flooding his face. For months he had been fighting to prove his innocence. And now, this stranger, this girl he had never met, was standing up for him. Richard stood abruptly. "This is nonsense! She's making this up!" But before he could continue, a uniformed officer entered the room holding a small hard drive. "Your Honor," the officer said, "our cyber division just confirmed her story. These files match the missing transaction data. Mr. Hale's credentials were used." The judge's eyes widened. "Is that true?" The officer nodded. "Yes, sir. The data was hidden under an encrypted directory." The courtroom fell, completely silent. Emily stood still, her heart pounding. The prosecutor looked pale. The judge leaned back, tapping his pen. "Mr. Hale," he said coldly, "do you have an explanation?" Richard stammered, sweat forming on his forehead. I was following orders." "Whose orders?" the judge interrupted. Richard hesitated, eyes darting toward Alexander. "His!" he shouted desperately, pointing. "He told me to do it." But Alexander finally stood, his voice calm but filled with pain. "Richard, after everything I gave you, I trusted you like family." Emily's eyes softened. She could see the heartbreak behind his controlled tone. The judge ordered security to detain Richard pending investigation. As the guards approached, Richard turned to Emily with fury in his eyes. "You'll regret this," he hissed. Emily didn't flinch. "Maybe," she said softly, "but at least the truth won't stay buried." The guards led him away. The judge looked at Emily. "Miss Carter, you've done something extraordinary today." The tension broke. Alexander turned to her. "Why did you help me?" She hesitated. "Because years ago, when the company was closing, you gave every employee a chance to find another job. You didn't know me, but that kindness saved me. This was my way of returning it." His eyes glistened. "You remembered that?" "How could I forget?" she whispered. The courtroom burst into applause. But for Emily, the story wasn't over, because the deeper she looked, the more secrets she would uncover about Alexander's past. When the hearing ended, reporters swarmed the courtroom steps. Cameras flashed as Alexander Cole walked out, a free man at last. But his gaze never left the girl who had saved him. Emily tried to slip away quietly, clutching her worn leather folder, but Alexander called out, "Miss Carter!" She froze. He approached her, the crowd parting. "You didn't have to do what you did today," he said. "Yet you risked everything." Emily smiled faintly. "Some truths are worth the risk." He studied her face for a moment. "Let me thank you properly. Dinner, perhaps?" She hesitated, then nodded. That night, at a quiet restaurant overlooking the city, they sat across from each other. Alexander looked tired, as if the years of accusation had carved lines into his soul. "When you spoke in court," he said, "I could hear conviction in your voice, like you'd lived it." Emily looked down. "Maybe I have," she murmured. "My father, he worked for coal industries. He died before the shutdown." Alexander froze. "Your father's name?" David Carter, she said softly. His expression changed. Shock flickered in his eyes. David was one of my most loyal engineers. He disappeared just before the audit. We never found out why. Emily nodded, her voice trembling. He left behind a letter I only recently found. It said he had discovered something dangerous within the company and something he couldn't talk about. Alexander leaned forward. Do you have that letter? She pulled it from her folder, unfolding the fragile paper. The ink had faded, but the words still screamed fear. If you're reading this, it means they found me. Don't trust anyone from the boardroom, especially the man pretending to protect the CEO. Alexander's pulse quickened. Richard, he muttered. Emily nodded. He must have known my father was close to exposing him. Silence hung between them as city lights reflected off the glass. Emily finally whispered, I didn't come to court for fame. I came because I needed to finish what my father started. Alexander looked at her, truly looked at her. Then you deserve more than thanks, he said quietly. You deserve answers. He led her to his car. Within an hour, they were standing in the darkened halls of the old coal industries building, long abandoned after the scandal. Dust covered the floors, and echoes of the past lingered in the air. I never came back here, Alexander said. Too many ghosts. Emily's flashlight cut through the dark. They found the old server room, wires dangling, machines cold and silent. This is where my father worked, she said softly. Then, beneath one of the desks, Emily noticed a loose panel. She knelt, pried it open, and gasped. Inside was a small steel box. Her hands shook as she opened it, revealing a flash drive wrapped in paper. The note read, For Emily. When the truth feels heavier than lies, remember, you were never supposed to find this. Alexander's throat tightened. Your father knew something monumental, he whispered. Emily nodded, slipping the drive into her pocket. And now it's up to us to uncover it. But as they left the building, a shadow moved in the upper window. Someone else was there, watching. As they stepped into the cold night, Emily felt a strange chill crawl up her spine. She turned back toward the building, certain she'd seen movement in one of the dark windows. We should go, Alexander said, opening the car door. But as they pulled away, headlights flickered on in the distance. Another car began to follow. Emily's heart pounded. Someone's behind us. Alexander checked the mirror. Hold on. He turned sharply onto a side road, tires screeching against wet asphalt. After a tense few minutes, the headlights vanished. They finally stopped near the river, both catching their breath. You were right, he said. Someone doesn't want us. Finding the truth, Emily looked at the flash drive in her hand. Then we must be close. They drove to Alexander's private office, locked the doors, and powered up his old computer. When the files loaded, Emily's breath caught. Inside were dozens of encrypted folders labeled Project Arcadia. What is this? She whispered. Alexander frowned. That's not one of mine. I never approved a project with that name. He clicked open a decrypted document. It was a series of reports, signed by none other than Richard Hales, his former vice president and supposed friend. The files revealed millions of dollars funneled into secret research labs, under the guise of charity initiatives. But the truth was darker. They were experimenting on low-income patients without consent. using new drug prototypes to test neural recovery treatments. Emily's voice shook. They used real people as test subjects? Alexander's face turned pale. And your father discovered it. One video file was attached. They opened it, and the screen flickered to life. A hidden camera showed David Carter confronting Richard. "You're endangering lives, Richard," David said. "The CEO will find out." Richard laughed coldly. "Alexander doesn't need to find out, because by the time he does, you'll be gone." The video ended abruptly. Emily stared in horror. "He killed my father," she whispered. Alexander clenched his fists, his jaw tight, and pinned it on me. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. The power flickered. Alexander grabbed Emily's hand. "We're not safe here." They hid behind the desk as footsteps approached. A man's voice called out, calm and mocking. "You should have stayed quiet, Emily." It was Richard. Alexander's eyes burned with rage. He whispered, "Stay down." Richard entered the office, holding a gun. "You both made this very difficult," he said. "That drive doesn't belong to you." Emily's heart raced, but she remembered her father's words, "When the truth feels heavier than lies." She suddenly stood up, voice trembling but loud. "You killed my father!" Richard smirked. "I did what I had to. The company was mine until you two started digging." He raised the gun toward her. A shot rang out, but it wasn't Richard's. Security burst through the doors. Guns drawn. Richard fell to the floor, clutching his shoulder. Alexander lowered the small pistol he had hidden in his desk, breathing heavily. "You'll never hurt anyone again," he said coldly. The officers rushed in, restraining Richard. Emily collapsed into a chair, trembling. The drive slipped from her hand, clattering onto the floor. "It's over," she whispered. But Alexander shook his head. "No, it's only just beginning. We need to expose everything. Your father deserves justice." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "Then let's finish what he started." As the police led Richard away, the first morning light began to rise beyond the glass windows. But outside, one of the officers slipped a phone from his pocket and whispered into it. "They found Arcadia." Somewhere on the other end, a voice replied, "Then we move to phase 2. Emily and Alexander had no idea. The truth they uncovered was only the surface of something much bigger. The following morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds of Alexander's office. Emily sat by the window, clutching a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. The world outside looked normal, but inside, everything had changed. "They said Richard's been taken into custody," Alexander said quietly, scrolling through his phone. "He's already started talking." "About Project Arcadia?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "And about someone else behind it. Someone higher." Emily's grip tightened around the cup. "There's always someone higher." A knock echoed on the door. A man in a gray suit stepped in, flashing an FBI badge. "Mr. Stone, Miss Carter, I'm Agent Miller. We've been assigned to the Arcadia case." Emily stood, her voice firm. "Do you know who's behind it?" The agent paused before speaking. "We're still gathering evidence. But your father was onto something much bigger than we thought. Arcadia wasn't just about illegal testing, it was about developing a neural manipulation device capable of altering memory." Alexander frowned. "That technology doesn't exist." "It does," Miller said. "And your company's research funds were being used to build it." Emily's heart dropped. You mean my father died trying to stop it? The agent nodded. And his death was made to look like an accident to keep Arcadia alive. Silence filled the room. Finally, Emily whispered, "Then we finish it." Miller looked between them. "You both are now part of this investigation. But be careful. Whoever's behind this doesn't just play dirty. They erase anyone who stands in their way." He left, the door clicking shut behind him. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, erasing people's memories. That's what they wanted the serum for. Emily looked up. To control the truth. That night, the two met again at the city's Memorial Park, the same place where her father's name was engraved. Emily traced his name with her fingers. "I thought the truth would make me feel better," she said softly. "But it just hurts more." Alexander stood beside her. "Truth always hurts before it heals." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "You were accused of something you didn't do, and you still helped me." He smiled faintly. "Because someone once told me kindness isn't about being repaid. It's about doing what's right, no matter who's watching." A tear slipped down her cheek. "That sounds like something my dad would have said." He hesitated, then placed a small flash drive in her hand. "There's more. Your father left encrypted messages in the company server. He knew Arcadia wasn't over. He wanted you to finish his work." Emily stared at the drive, trembling. "I can't do this alone." "You won't," Alexander said firmly. "We'll do it together." Just then his phone buzzed. A message appeared from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have opened Arcadia." His eyes widened. He showed her the screen. "They know." Before they could react, a black SUV pulled up across the street. The headlights stayed on, Emily whispered. "They're watching us." Alexander took her hand. "Then let them watch us fight." They turned and walked away from the memorial, leaving fear behind. Over the next weeks, they worked with the FBI, exposing years of corruption and human experimentation. Richard testified, revealing a secret council of investors funding Arcadia. Headlines spread: "Billionaire CEO and daughter of whistleblower. Expose global scandal." Justice was finally being served. Months later, Alexander visited. Emily at the community center she'd reopened in her father's name. Children laughed in the background as she handed out books. "You kept your promise," he said. "To prove the innocent are worth fighting for," she smiled. He handed her a single white envelope. "For you." Inside was a deed. The center now legally belonged to her. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said softly. "Because your father saved lives, and you saved mine." For a long moment, they just stood there, two souls connected by pain, truth and healing. As he turned to leave, Emily called after him. "What about Arcadia?" He smiled faintly. "Destroyed for good." But as he walked away, far across the street, a man in a gray suit slipped a small chip into his phone, one marked with a symbol, an A carved through a circle. Emily watched the reflection fade in the glass door, unaware that Arcadia wasn't gone. It had only gone deeper underground.